If you grow up never being the favorite, you learn to live like you're replaceable. That line had echoed in my head for years, like a quiet truth I never dared say out loud. But it was always there, woven into the way I moved through life. I kept my expectations low, my voice softer than most, and my presence neatly tucked at the edge of every family photo. I didn't stir the pot. I didn't ask for more than what was handed. I was the one who handled her own business, paid her bills, sent the birthday cards on time. I was the quiet one. That morning had started like any other. I had my black coffee, no sugar. My apartment was still and clean, like I preferred it. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, catching the floating dust like little motes of memory. I was reviewing a client's quarterly spreadsheet when the wave of dizziness hit. Not just a fleeting moment, it lingered. The edges of my vision darkened. My chest felt like it was being gripped from the inside. I caught myself on the kitchen counter, stood there breathing hard until the world righted itself. It wasn't the first time. I'd been having these episodes for weeks, blaming them on stress, the heat, skipped meals, but that morning felt different. That morning, I called the clinic. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and wilted magazines. I kept shifting in the plastic chair, unsure whether it was my heart or my nerves making my hands tremble. A nurse called my name, and I followed her into a sterile room with two bright lights and a blood pressure cuff that felt tighter than it should have. The doctor, a man in his 50s with tired eyes and a wedding ring that looked too loose, looked over my chart, then looked at me like he was about to deliver bad news. And he was. "Ione," he began, his voice clinical, steady. "You have a degenerative heart condition. Rare, but real. You'll need surgery, soon." "How soon is soon?" I asked. 3 weeks, ideally. Beyond that, there's a significant risk of irreversible damage. 3 weeks. That was the timeline stamped into my chest. A countdown I hadn't asked for. I nodded. I didn't ask how rare it was, how risky. I just asked, how much? He hesitated. Then, with insurance, the upfront cost would be minimal. Without it, we're talking low 6 figures. I remember that moment like it happened in a separate room. Me sitting there, nodding calmly, while a thin sheet of panic pressed under my skin. But then I exhaled, because I had a safety net. "My mother has a policy," I said. 200,000, emergency only. I'm listed as the beneficiary. I remember the doctor writing something down, glancing up briefly. "Good, that should give you options." The drive home blurred. I don't remember the turns or the traffic lights, only the echo of that number in my head. 3 weeks. I walked into my apartment and pulled out the envelope where I kept a copy of the life insurance policy. My name was printed in neat type, Ione Larkin, sole beneficiary. Bashia had taken me to sign the documents herself almost 10 years ago. "Just in case," she'd said, "I want to make sure you're covered if something ever happens." Back then, I'd believed her. I'd filed that promise away like a safety deposit box in my mind, something solid, something reliable. I looked at the policy again, let the paper weigh against my hand. That's when I called the insurance company. The hold music was a tinny piano loop that might have driven me crazy if I weren't already hanging by a thread. After 10 minutes, a woman with a pleasant voice answered, asking for my information. I gave it, slowly, clearly, waited while she typed. Then she paused, a beat too long. "I'm sorry, Miss Larkin," she said, careful now. "You're no longer listed as the beneficiary." "What?" "The beneficiary was updated, recently. The current name is Xanthi Barlow. My sister." I sat there on the edge of my couch, the receiver still pressed to my ear, the voice still talking in the background, explaining procedures, protocols. I didn't hear a word after that. The room around me suddenly felt too quiet, like the world was holding its breath just to see how I would react. I hung up, called my mother. She picked up on the third ring, like she hadn't been expecting me, but wasn't surprised either. "Mom," I said, my voice even, calm, too calm. "Did you change the policy?" There was a pause, not long, just enough. "Yes," she said, dry, unapologetic. "Why?" It made more sense that way. I swallowed hard. "I'm facing open heart surgery. That money, Xanthi's opening a new clinic, she interrupted. It's a chance for her to really make something of herself. You understand. Do I? I asked, the heat rising in my throat. At least she'll enjoy it, she said. Just like that. Like I was an insurance line item she'd reallocated to a better investment. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling, then at the picture of my father on the shelf next to it. He'd died when I was 15. I wondered if he'd be horrified or just quietly disappointed. That was the moment I realized my death wasn't a tragedy to her. It was strategic. I sat on the edge of the couch long after the call ended, my phone slipping slowly from my hand onto the carpet. Everything around me felt like it was underwater. The hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of the wall clock, even my own breathing. None of it landed. I was frozen in place, eyes staring forward, seeing nothing. She knew. That whisper escaped me like an accusation to no one. Baisha had known about my condition. I'd told her the week before, how I'd nearly blacked out in the kitchen, how the doctor had said, urgent. She didn't even flinch when I told her, just nodded like I was talking about a car needing new brakes. She knew. And she still changed it. I stood abruptly and paced across the hardwood floor. My knees felt weaker than I'd ever let them. I circled the coffee table twice, stopped at the window, then turned back around. I needed proof, real proof. I picked up the phone again, this time with both hands steady, and dialed the insurance office. A different voice this time. Younger, cheerful, maybe early 20s. She introduced herself, asked how she could help. I recited my policy number slowly, clearly, spelling out my name the way you do when you know someone's about to pretend not to hear it. A pause, then tapping keys. Another pause. Ma'am, the beneficiary on this policy was updated 2 weeks ago. It was changed in person. In person? My voice was calm, but my heartbeat thudded so loud I was sure she could hear it. Yes, with signed paperwork. It was processed and finalized with her legal representative present. Can I get a copy of that? We can email you a PDF version of the most recent beneficiary form. Do that. 5 minutes later, it was in my inbox. I opened the document with the kind of dread usually reserved for bad medical scans. There it was. My name, typed once in the original version, was now crossed out with a single, bold line. Beneath it, Xanthi Barlow. No hesitation. No explanation. Just a clean swap, like I was an outdated contact being replaced by someone more efficient. I read it again. Then again. There was no typo. No clerical error. No hope that it might be a misunderstanding. I wasn't just removed. I was replaced, with legal documentation, with signatures. I leaned back on the couch, letting my head rest against the wall behind me. The silence in the room wasn't comforting. It was heavy. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. I called the office again. I need to know one more thing, I said when the same voice answered. Of course. Who's the new beneficiary? Pause. Ma'am, I'm not asking for personal details. I just want a name. She hesitated, then said, Xanthi Barlow. Of course. Of course it was her. I ended the call, dropped the phone beside me, and stared at the ceiling. My mind didn't go to the present. It went backward, like old footage rolling through a projector. The time Xanthi got a car for her 16th birthday, while I got a lecture about responsibility. The year she dropped out of college, and somehow, Mom blamed her professors. The Thanksgiving I cooked the entire meal while she showed up late, got praised for the cranberry sauce she didn't even make. It had always been this way. I grabbed my keys and left the apartment. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't have to. Baisha always kept her Sundays the same. Church in the morning, errands in the afternoon, a cup of tea by 4. The drive took 12 minutes. I pulled into her cul-de-sac and parked a little too neatly. Her house looked exactly like I remembered. Manicured bushes, wind chimes by the porch, and a front door painted a cheery blue like everything inside it was warm and welcoming. I knocked once. The door opened before I could knock again. She was already smiling. I figured you'd call again. I didn't call, I said. Then I figured you'd come. I stepped inside without waiting. The smell of jasmine and lemon cleaner wrapped around me like a trap. I stood in the entryway. She motioned toward the living room, but I didn't move. You changed the policy. Yes. It was mine. No, she corrected. It was mine. I paid for it. I decided where it was needed most. You knew I needed surgery. I also know Xanthi has a future, a clinic, staff depending on her. She's healthy, I snapped. I'm not. She blinked, not in surprise, but like she was waiting for me to stop. At least she'll enjoy it, she said, folding her arms like this was a business decision. I'm not asking for enjoyment. I'm asking for my life. You've always been a little dramatic, Ione. That hasn't changed. There was no raised voice, no slamming doors, just that sentence, delivered with the same tone she used when reminding me to set the table growing up. I looked at her, really looked at her. And in that moment, I saw her not as my mother, but as someone who had made a decision, a clear one, with full understanding of what it meant. She hadn't acted out of confusion or emotion. She had acted with intent. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I turned, opened the front door, and stepped back into the sunlight. She didn't stop me. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask anything at all. I reached my car, unlocked it, and sat in the driver's seat. Hands on the wheel, the seat still warm from earlier. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, replaying everything. She didn't just choose Xanthi. She chose who she wanted to live. The silence after that visit wasn't just awkward, it was calculated. I hadn't heard a single word from Bashia or Xanthi in days. No call to check if I made it home. No text pretending to clarify anything. Just pure, echoing nothing. Everything else kept moving. The city hummed like it always did. Cars passing by my window, emails piling up from clients, bills arriving like clockwork. But I moved through my days like a woman watching her own life from a distance. I could still open QuickBooks, respond to invoices, mark tasks as complete, but I wasn't really there. My body might have stayed upright, but something in me had buckled. I couldn't stop hearing her say it. You were never very good with money, said with a chuckle, like it was just another quirk of mine, not a flaw, an explanation, a reason to justify why I didn't deserve the thing that could save my life. I stopped replying to messages from friends, skipped a virtual meetup I usually looked forward to. The thought of small talk felt absurd. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way most people define anger. I was undone. But beneath the unraveling, something else was beginning to take shape. A quiet thread of clarity that hadn't existed before. That clarity unraveled further when Aunt Claire invited me to dinner. You don't have to stay long, she said. It's just a little thing for Xanthi. You should come. It sounded innocent, but everything in this family that sounded innocent rarely ever was. Still, I went. It was held at a cousin's house in the suburbs, neutral territory, the kind of place with beige rugs and perfectly portioned appetizers from Trader Joe's, the kind of event where people talked more about renovations than relationships. The moment I walked in, I knew I shouldn't have come. Baisha was already there, standing beside Xanthi like a campaign manager, beaming as someone snapped photos of them near a flower arrangement. I took a seat quietly near the corner of the room. Dinner was served buffet style, everyone complimenting the salmon, asking about vacation plans. I focused on cutting my food into even bites, chewing longer than necessary just to fill the silence on my end. Midway through the meal, Uncle Darren stood and tapped his glass. Let's raise a toast to Xanthi, he said, holding up his wine. She's just opened her second clinic. That's no small feat, takes guts, vision, and real leadership. Basia chimed in, voice rich with pride. She's a fighter, a real winner. We couldn't be prouder. Clinks of glasses, murmured congratulations, and not one mention of me, not my surgery, not my condition, not even my presence. Aunt Claire leaned in and whispered, They probably don't want to bring up anything heavy tonight. I smiled, nodded like I agreed, like I wasn't drowning in a room full of people who knew me and chose to look away. I excused myself to the restroom and locked the door behind me. I stood there in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. I looked fine. That was always the problem. I didn't look like someone who was dying. I didn't look like someone who'd been erased. But I was. Back home that night, I decided to check my joint bank account with Basia. A part of me still clung to logic. Maybe the policy had been transferred, but the money she'd promised for emergencies was still there. Maybe she hadn't cut me out entirely. I logged in. Denied. I tried again. Same result. The next morning, I went to the bank in person, sat across from a woman named Julia who wore peach lipstick and looked both bored and vaguely sympathetic. "I'm sorry," she said, typing into her terminal. "That account is no longer accessible to you." "That's not possible," I replied. "I've had access to it for over a decade. It was a joint account. My name should still be on it." "According to this," she said, spinning the screen toward me, "your name was removed 2 weeks ago by the co-owner, which, legally, she had the right to do." She didn't tell me. She wasn't required to. I left the bank numb. No confrontation this time, no phone call, no begging for an explanation. I was learning not to ask people why they chose to hurt me. The answers never helped. That night, I opened every file I had stored in my cloud drive. Old emails, copies of policy documents, bank statements, anything I could find. I needed to see it all in one place, needed to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined the promises, the signatures, the intent. And there it was, a PDF dated nearly 10 years ago. The original life insurance policy. Ione Larkin, sole beneficiary. Typed clean, signed in ink, stored carefully in a folder I labeled Emergency. I stared at the name that used to hold weight. It looked foreign now, like a stranger's. They didn't forget me, they deleted me. I printed the document and laid it on my desk next to the new version. The contrast was jarring, not just visually, symbolically. What once had my name now bore someone else's. I ran my fingers along the edge of the paper. I opened a spreadsheet and began building a timeline, not for drama, for proof. March 3rd, finalized policy. Ione listed. April 10th, joint account opened. May 14th, email from Basia promising coverage if anything ever happens. September 2nd, policy updated. Ione removed. September 4th, joint account closed to Ione. September 7th, I was diagnosed. I kept going. Entry after entry, screenshot after screenshot. This wasn't an oversight. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a dismantling. And I was done watching it happen. I remembered something Grandma used to say, back when she was still sharp. If they don't give you a seat at the table, build your own ledger. I didn't understand it as a child. I understood it now. This wasn't going to be about making them feel bad. It was going to be about facts, receipts, dates, paperwork, the trail they thought I wouldn't follow. I looked around my apartment, still quiet, still mine. And finally, in that silence, I felt something shift. If they wanted me gone quietly, they should have made sure I had nothing left to fight with. 2 days had passed since I started pulling together what little evidence I had left of who I used to be in this family. And not a word, not from Basia, not from Xanthi, not even a courtesy text from a cousin who might have noticed I hadn't been around. That kind of silence wasn't passive. It was a strategy. They were hoping I'd shrink into the background again. They were hoping I'd fall in line, quietly, like I always did. But instead of shrinking, I went digging. I pulled out the fireproof lockbox from under my bed. It was heavy, dusty, filled with a mess of tax records, expired car registrations, and receipts I kept out of habit more than necessity. Buried under layers of paper and disuse was the folder I'd labeled Policy Original. Inside was the hard copy of the life insurance agreement Bachia and I had signed at the bank nearly a decade ago, the same day she'd told me, "This is just to be safe. You're the one I trust to handle things." My name was there, printed cleanly in Section 4, beside the bolded words, Primary Beneficiary. Not Xanthi. Me. I grabbed the printed copy of the updated version I'd requested from the insurance company and laid them side by side on the dining table. My hands rested flat on each page like I needed to physically hold the truth down before it disappeared. The difference in signatures was subtle, but it was there. My neat cursive, the one I'd practiced since high school, signed clearly on one, erased from the other. In its place, Xanthi's full name in pens so heavy it almost dented the paper. I stood there for a long time, not moving, not blinking, just letting that image sear itself into memory. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. They had rewritten the facts and expected me not to notice. Later that night, I received a text from Batya. Family dinner Friday. Claire's hosting. Don't be dramatic. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command dressed in casual suggestion. Still, I went. I arrived at Aunt Claire's home in the suburbs just as the sun began to slip behind the neighbor's roofline. She greeted me at the door with a brittle smile and air kiss, ushering me in with a whisper of, "I'm so glad you made it. Please, no scenes." Inside, the dining room was perfectly set. China plates, embroidered napkins, wine glasses catching the dim light. The crowd was mostly the usual suspects: cousins, in-laws, two retired uncles who always argued about sports. In the center, of course, was Batya, poised beside Xanthi, who was wearing a silk blouse I recognized as one Batya used to own. Dinner was served. Conversation buzzed around achievements, work trips, yoga studios. I kept my fork moving, even though my appetite had long since left the room. Then the toast began. Uncle Darren stood, cleared his throat like he was delivering a eulogy for humility itself. To Xanthi, he said, raising his glass, for opening her second wellness clinic, for being the kind of woman this family can be proud of. Baisha added, with a hand on Xanthi's arm, she's the reason I still believe in legacy. There it was, not a single glance toward me, not a mention of my name, of what I was going through. To them, I had already exited the narrative. I felt Claire's hand on my arm. She leaned in. They probably don't want to bring up anything heavy. I nodded and excused myself. In the guest bathroom, I stood under the white light, hands gripping the marble sink. I was alive, but to them, I was already gone. The next morning, I drove to Basia's house to pick up the rest of my things. She'd texted, "Don't forget your stuff in the guest room." Except when I walked in, it wasn't a guest room anymore. It was a listing. Fresh towels folded into perfect triangles. A laminated welcome note. An electronic keypad lock on the door. A hand-drawn chalkboard that read, "Welcome to your cozy home away from home." I turned to Batya, who was coming down the hallway like this was nothing out of the ordinary. "You're listing my room?" I asked. "You weren't using it. I told you I'd be coming back after surgery." "Well," she shrugged, "plans change. You can stay on the couch, or maybe with a friend." My eyes scanned the room again, taking in the space that used to hold my childhood furniture. Gone. Even the lamp I'd painted in 8th grade was missing. They'd rather sell my bed to a stranger than make space for me to heal. She didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. I didn't argue. I walked out. In the car, I sat in the same silence I'd known for years. Thick, present, suffocating. Then I opened the Airbnb app. The listing popped up fast. Photos of the room, warm lighting, cheerful descriptions. Family-friendly, centrally located, ideal for solo travelers. And there, under the listing, no mention of whose room it used to be, just 5 stars from strangers who'd apparently slept better than I had in months. A quote came back to me. Toni Morrison, I think. "If you want to fly, you have to give up the things that weigh you down." I texted Sarah, an old college friend. "Hey, is your guest room still open for a few days?" "Always," she replied. "Bring wine." I packed what was left of my belongings into the car and drove, not away from them, but toward myself. Later that night, in Sarah's spare room, I opened my laptop and began creating a document titled Erasure Evidence. It was plain, just a name and date for now, but it would grow. Screenshots of the original and revised policies, photos of the bank statements, audio files from phone calls I'd recorded without ever planning to use them, messages, emails, time-stamped texts. I didn't have rage anymore. I had receipts. They wrote me out. But I kept the trail. They didn't hear me scream, but they'll hear me speak. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the message popped up on my screen. It was from Nora, a woman I hadn't spoken to since college, back when we both thought law school was the answer to everything. She now worked in the legal department of an insurance company, the very one holding the policy my mother had rewritten without so much as a second thought. "Hey, Ione," the message began. "Saw something today that made me think of you. Probably nothing, but it didn't sit right." I replied instantly. She called me that afternoon. Her voice was low, cautious, like she was watching over her shoulder. "Your mom submitted paperwork last month that expedited the beneficiary transfer. It flagged internally, but legal waved it through." "What do you mean flagged?" "There was a clause, language stating you were no longer capable of managing your own finances or making sound health decisions. That you were deteriorating, physically and cognitively." I couldn't breathe for a moment. She said I was mentally unfit? "She didn't say it directly," Nora clarified, "but the way it was written, it was enough to get the change through without notifying you." I scribbled every word she said into a notepad, like I was taking minutes for my own betrayal. After we hung up, I sat in silence. But it wasn't the same silence I'd known for weeks. This one had teeth. They hadn't just erased me, they'd rewritten me. That night, a cousin tagged me in a group photo from Basia's birthday invitation, a glossy image of invitations wrapped in gold ribbon. I hadn't received one. Turns out Xanthi was throwing her a birthday gala. A full-scale catered event. It wasn't just a party, it was an opportunity for them to polish their image in public, to remind the family who was thriving. I scrolled through the guest list. My name wasn't there. Didn't matter. Sometimes, being uninvited is the loudest invitation to speak. I showed up. 2 nights later, I walked into the venue alone. I wore a black dress, not fancy, just sharp. My hair was tied back, lips bare. I didn't come to blend in, I came to exist. The event was held at a rental space downtown, the kind with exposed brick walls and Edison bulb chandeliers that people rent for weddings and marketing launches. There were servers in white shirts passing mini quiches, a jazz trio near the back. Everyone was dressed to impress. I made it 3 steps into the lobby before someone blocked my path. "I'm sorry," the young man said. "Are you with the family?" I tilted my head. "I am the family." He looked down at a clipboard, eyes scanning. "We were given instructions. If a woman named Ione Larkin shows up, we're to ask her to leave." I exhaled slowly, controlled. "Can you deliver a message for me?" I said calmly. He hesitated, nodded. "Tell my mother I was here. I am still alive." Then I turned and walked out. No yelling, no grand exit, just my heels clicking across polished concrete. But the silence I left in that lobby had weight. In the car, I didn't cry. I opened the voice memo app and hit record. "This is Ione Larkin. It's 7:43 p.m. I attempted to enter my mother's birthday event, hosted by my sister Xanthi Barlow. I was denied entry by venue staff, who were instructed to turn me away. I was not notified of the event, nor was I invited. I laid out the timeline, the lies, the legal maneuvering, the insult of being erased, and the audacity of being rewritten. I wasn't speaking emotionally anymore. I was documenting. They want me to stay small, but I've grown too big to fit their silence. The next morning, I printed the transcript of that voice memo. I added it to the folder I'd been building, receipts. Then I called Nora again and told her I was ready. "I need to file a formal complaint with the state board," I said. "I've documented the alteration of a life insurance policy made under false pretenses. I have legal proof of identity, a paper trail of the original agreement, and a witness to the unauthorized language that pushed it through." She told me to prepare a timeline, witnesses, backups. So I did. I listed everything. The day I was diagnosed, the moment I told Basia, the date of the beneficiary change, the closed bank account, the dinner party where I was publicly ignored, the Airbnb listing for my old bedroom, the voicemail from my cousin about the birthday gala, and the photo of me standing in front of the event, a ghost outside my own family. I scanned the pages, backed them up to 2 encrypted drives. I emailed one copy to Nora, another to myself. I printed the rest and sealed them in an envelope marked, "To be opened if they try to silence me again." For the first time in weeks, the weight didn't sit on my chest. It rested on theirs. They had their party. Now I'll plan my presentation. Elowen had texted me earlier that morning, her message brief and knowing. You should go, not to speak, just to see. The invitation itself hadn't come to me directly, of course. It was posted on Facebook, tagged and praised by half the family. Honoring Xanthi Barlow's outstanding contributions to the community, the banner read, with a soft gold border and a picture of her mid-laugh in front of a spa mirror. There was no mention of me. There hadn't been in a long time. I didn't RSVP. I didn't click interested. I just ironed a blouse, buttoned it to the top, tied my hair back, and showed up. The banquet hall was filled with people who smelled like expensive cologne and talked like they were always networking. White tablecloths, name cards, charcuterie boards. I walked in alone and took a seat at the far side, out of the line of cameras, but close enough to see everything. The program started just after sunset. A few dull speeches about civic responsibility. Then came hers. Basia stood at the front with the ease of someone who'd done this before. Warm smile, composed posture. We all know what it means to raise a child with drive, she said, her voice ringing clear through the room. A child who doesn't just take up space, but fills it with purpose. My stomach clenched. I'm proud to call Xanthi not just my daughter, but the woman who carried the torch forward. In a world full of excuses, she's action. In a time full of noise, she's clarity. People clapped. A few stood. I stayed seated. She's the reason I still believe in legacy. That sentence landed like a slap. My name wasn't mentioned once. My condition, my absence from the policy, the fact that I was sitting in that room, none of it existed in her speech. I glanced around. A few guests looked away when they noticed me. Some whispered. One woman I didn't know offered a small, pitiful smile. I forced one back, held my wine glass still to keep my hands from trembling. She didn't just leave me out of the story. She told the world I'd never existed. After the speeches, I went to the buffet line. I wasn't hungry, but I needed the movement. As I reached for a plate, my cousin Marion leaned toward me. Ione! Hey! I didn't know you were coming. Neither did they, I said without smiling. She hesitated. Can I tell you something? I nodded. Xanthi said. She lowered her voice, glancing behind her. She told someone at her spa that if you didn't make it, it would be easier on everyone. My hand tightened around the serving spoon. She said what? I didn't want to repeat it. You deserve to know. I stared at the chicken skewers like they might offer answers. Then I turned away, left the plate untouched. I didn't confront Xanthi. Not there. Not in front of those white linens and fake smiles. But something in me shifted. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't neglect. This was survival calculus, and I was the one they'd hoped wouldn't make it. Outside, the air had cooled. I walked toward my car parked under a flickering streetlight. My heels clicked across the pavement. With every step, my heartbeat steadied. Not fast from emotion, but firm from knowing. Knowing what I'd always suspected, but never said aloud. They weren't hoping I'd recover. They were counting on me to disappear. I leaned against my car and pulled out my phone. Opened the recorder app. Pressed record. This is Ione Larkin. It's 9:12 p.m., Friday night. Location, Riverwalk Event Hall. Event, award ceremony for Xanthi Barlow. Statement made by cousin Marion Evans relayed at approximately 8:47 p.m. If you didn't make it, it would be easier on everyone. Context implies premeditated emotional exclusion. Emotional motive. Familial erasure. I saved the file and titled it, Family Intention, Log Number 6. This wasn't about making them apologize anymore. This was about clarity. And I was no longer collecting reasons to be angry. I was collecting evidence. Back at my apartment, I powered on my laptop and opened a new folder. Project Reset. Inside, I began creating lists, names, incidents, things said, people who had watched it happen and chosen silence. I created 3 subfolders: legal references, financial statements, emotional records. In one tab, I copied the phrase fiduciary fraud. In another, medical defamation. I wasn't a lawyer, but I didn't need to be one to see that lines had been crossed. I jotted notes. Who witnessed the policy shift? Who overheard Bashia referring to me as unfit? Did anyone know the account was closed before I did? I wasn't preparing a lawsuit yet. I was preparing a case. A moral one. A documented one. A record they couldn't twist. I added a final document. Statement of intent. In it, I wrote plainly, I am not doing this to win their approval. I am doing this to ensure that what happened to me cannot be rewritten. If they want history on their terms, they can write fiction. I'll write facts. As I closed the laptop, a thought settled over me like warm armor. They'll forget what they said. I won't forget what it meant. This isn't a story about survival anymore. It's about reclamation. It was almost 2 in the morning when I decided to listen to the recording again. The one I'd saved from my last visit to Batia's house. Before the policy switch, before the birthday gala, before the spreadsheet of proof. I had forgotten I'd even left my phone recording in my coat pocket during that confrontation. But it was all there. Her voice played clearly through the small Bluetooth speaker on my nightstand. You're never going to use that money, Baisha said, casual and unbothered. Why let it go to waste? I closed my eyes. Let it sink in. Let the shape of her logic form itself like a cold hand on my neck. Then came the line I hadn't heard before, one I hadn't noticed until tonight. She's not capable of surviving this anyway. My breath caught. That wasn't just practical cruelty. That was intent. That was calculation laced with dismissal, with finality. She wasn't talking about my odds. She was laying out the plan. I hit pause. Saved the file under the name, Primary Evidence Statement of Intent. There was no anger this time, just stillness. That moment you realize the enemy isn't trying to wound you. They've already buried the knife and moved on. The next day, I packed my laptop and drove to the public library downtown. The older man at the help desk pointed me toward a public terminal near the window. I logged in and began searching for public insurance filings tied to Batia's name. I wasn't expecting to find much. But then I did. It was a request to expedite the beneficiary reassignment, citing declining cognitive function of dependent, followed by an attached statement implying I was no longer competent to manage financial affairs. She'd called me unstable, failing, without ever saying it to my face. They didn't just take my name. They took my autonomy. I printed the filing, printed the date, highlighted the clause. It was fabricated, of course. No doctors, no documentation. Just words, clean and cruel, submitted under oath. After I left the library, I drove straight to Nora's office. She was waiting for me with 2 cups of coffee and a legal pad already half filled. I have the audio, I said. And the filing. She slid her glasses on. Let me hear it. I played the recording. Her face stayed still. At the end, she only said, Save that in 3 places. I handed her the filing. She skimmed it, then set it down. You're not going to like this, she said. Try me. It's not illegal to be a terrible parent, she said, but it is illegal to knowingly submit false statements to manipulate a financial policy. So, we've got a case if you can show a pattern. This recording helps, but we'll need corroboration. Anyone else hear her say things like this? Anyone else she's tried to discredit you to? I thought of Marion's whisper, of Elowen's knowing glances, of Lilac's silence, thick with the truth she wasn't ready to say out loud. I'll find them, I said. Nora nodded. Start documenting. That night, back in my apartment, I opened a new folder on my backup drive, named it Exhibit A. Inside, I created subfolders for every kind of evidence I had. Audio, legal documents, text screenshots, timeline entries. I organized it with the precision of someone rebuilding her name, brick by brick. I sat with my back straight, shoulders firm. There was no shaking in my hands anymore. I wasn't fighting to be forgiven. I was fighting to be recorded. Some wars don't need armor, just receipts. I clicked record on my webcam and looked into the lens. My name is Ione Larkin, I began. I was the original beneficiary of a $200,000 life insurance policy. In September, that designation was changed without my knowledge, using statements that implied I was mentally and physically incapable of managing my own health and finances. I didn't blink. This is my record. I spoke for 15 minutes, laying out every detail, dates, locations, witnesses, the day the money disappeared, the day the account was closed, the moment I was turned away at a door I used to walk through without knocking. When I finished, I saved the video in 3 places and closed the lid of my laptop. A few hours later, as I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You need to stop before this gets ugly." That was all it said. I read it twice. The wording was familiar, eerily so. It was the same phrasing Xanthi used in high school when she found out I got into a better college. Same tone, same threat behind the text. I smiled. Not out of amusement, out of recognition. I sat down, pulled out a notebook, and wrote the message verbatim, dated it, filed it under threats. Then I opened my browser and began drafting the letter to the State Board of Insurance. They were hoping I'd stay quiet. If they wanted silence, they chose the wrong daughter. I was finishing a cup of tea in Elowen's kitchen when the call came. It was Lilac. We hadn't spoken in weeks, not since she looked at me in the hallway of the hospital and couldn't meet my eyes. But tonight, she called. "Hey," she said, voice lower than usual, like she was checking behind her for eavesdroppers. "I've been thinking about our last conversation." "Okay." "I heard your mom say something to a nurse when you were admitted." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. She told them, "If there's a triage situation, she's not a good risk for recovery. We don't want resources wasted." I closed my eyes. Not from pain, just confirmation. My mother hadn't just failed to protect me, she'd actively tried to make me expendable. "I didn't know what to do at the time," Lilac continued, "but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't tell you." "No," I said. "You're doing the right thing. Thank you." After we hung up, I didn't cry. I walked outside, barefoot on Elowen's porch, the boards cool beneath me. The sky above was the kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions. They didn't just plan around my death. They ordered it. The next morning, as I was still reeling from Lilac's revelation, I got another blow. Marion, my cousin, forwarded me a video clip. "No commentary, just watch," her text said. It was Xanthi, her voice unmistakable, her face lit by the filtered glow of her spa's private Instagram live. "She's always been a problem," she was saying, swirling a wineglass. "That policy, it's better in hands that can use it." Someone off-screen laughed. Xanthi smirked. "To finally cutting dead weight." She raised her glass and toasted the camera. I watched it 3 times, not out of disbelief, but to etch every syllable into my memory. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. I downloaded the video, saved it in 3 folders, backed it up to a flash drive. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. This was wrought, systemic, intentional, and shameless. That night, Elowen cleared the dining table. She brought out a folder labeled Contingency. Inside were paper copies of every email, document, and text I'd shared with her. We laid them out one by one. "I'm going public," I said, my voice even. She nodded. "I'll testify if it comes to that." We didn't talk in drama. We strategized. Flash drives labeled, printouts organized, binders filled. I sat at her laptop and began composing the message that would change everything. Family group chat. A collection of cousins, aunts, uncles, and the occasional neighbor still too nosy to leave. Usually filled with birthday reminders and casserole recipes. Tonight, it would become a courtroom. I typed, "You want the truth? Let me give it to you in her own words." Attached were screenshots from the Instagram video, a voice recording from Lilac explaining Basia's medical order, and 2 audio clips from our family events. I paused before hitting send, not from fear, from gravity. Then I hit it. The read receipts came fast. Then came the comments. "What is this? Is this real? Ione, are you safe? Do you need legal help?" Silence from Basia, silence from Xanthi, but the group chat kept pinging. I set the phone down and sat with Elowen on the couch. "They're panicking," I said. She smiled without turning her head. "About time." Then the text came, from Xanthi. "You think this is going to win people back?" I typed my reply slowly. No. I think it's going to show them who you've always been. She didn't respond again. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, made a cup of coffee, sat back down and opened my own social media. I posted the video. I clipped the audio. I posted a calm, factual explanation. No accusations, no names, just timelines, legal definitions, and first-hand evidence. No music, no dramatic cuts, just truth. They silenced me because they thought no one would believe me. But when truth has a voice, it doesn't whisper. Tomorrow, I submit the official complaint. But tonight, they heard me. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating across the nightstand. It was 6:04 a.m. My screen was glowing with a wall of notifications, group texts, Facebook messages, missed calls, 2 voicemails, and 1 blinking bubble from a number I didn't recognize. My chest tightened as I opened the family group chat. There were over 150 unread messages. It didn't take long to realize that what I'd sent last night, video, audio, and screenshots, had detonated like a bomb in the middle of a quiet living room. Some of the comments were confused. What is all this? Others angry. This has gone too far. But buried in the noise were messages that cut deeper than I expected. I always wondered why you were so quiet all these years, Ione. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have said something sooner. I believed them. I'm ashamed of that. They didn't care when I whispered. But now that I'd shouted, they were scrambling. I closed the app and set the phone down. Not in triumph, there wasn't any of that yet, but with the stillness of someone who no longer needed to justify their presence. Around noon, I went to the grocery store. I needed toothpaste, cereal, nothing dramatic, but even the mundane can turn revealing. Mrs. Logan, who always greeted me near the frozen section, turned her cart in the opposite direction when she saw me, and in the checkout line, the young clerk glanced down awkwardly before mumbling, "My aunt follows you on Facebook now, said she read your post." I nodded, polite. Hope she learned something. As I walked to my car, I passed my old high school friend's mother. She gave me that tight-lipped look, the one reserved for divorcees and black sheep. "My mom told everyone you'd moved out of state years ago," she said without prompt, "that you didn't keep in touch." I laughed once, low and sharp. No, I was just edited out. They'd rewritten me so cleanly, it didn't occur to anyone I might still exist. That night, I opened my laptop to find new comments under my post. Dozens, some supportive, others attacking. The most recent came from a profile with no picture. "Family drama belongs in therapy, not online. You're clearly just bitter." Another said, "What daughter smears her own mother in public like this?" I hovered over the comment box. For a second, I considered shutting everything down, disabling comments, deleting posts. But instead, I typed a response. "If you've ever been erased, this is your space." I pinned it. That's when I saw Basia's post. A public one, just vague enough to seem wise. "Some people crave attention more than truth. I pray for them." It had 24 likes, mostly from her church friends. Of course. Then Xanthi posted to her story, clinking glasses of champagne, captioned, "Unbothered, always." Her smile looked too wide, too white, and completely manufactured. I rolled my eyes. It wasn't anger anymore, it was data. 20 minutes later, a message came through my DMs. It was from a woman named Rachel. We'd gone to school together. Our lockers had been across the hall. I barely remembered her voice. "Hi, Ione," it read. "I thought you should see this." Attached was a screenshot of a post in a local community group. It was Basia. "She's not well," the post said. "She's always had emotional struggles. Sometimes the lines between real and imagined blur for her." Below it were comments, a mix of sympathy, dismissal, and one reply from someone saying, "That's so sad. I hope she gets help." I stared at it for a long time. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from Ms. Feldman, my 11th grade English teacher. She commented publicly on my original post. Ione was always quiet in class, but when she spoke, it mattered. She carried herself with dignity, even when she wasn't treated kindly. I believe her. I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath and typed, Thank you. Support was growing, small, quiet waves, but enough to remind me I wasn't shouting into a void. The next day, I sat at my desk and pulled out a fresh legal pad. I divided the page into 3 columns: date, event, evidence. I began with the diagnosis, then the policy change, the closed bank account, the party I was denied, Lilac's testimony, the nurse's audio, Xanthi's video, all of it, item by item, entry by entry. The digital version lived on 2 encrypted drives, but this was the version I could feel under my fingers. I opened a new document and began drafting the formal complaint. I addressed it to the State Board of Insurance, attached files, cross-referenced documents. Into the voice recorder, I spoke plainly. I'm not after pity, I'm building a case. I paused, then added, this is no longer about what they took from me, it's about what they don't get to keep. I clicked save. Then I sat back, breathed deeply, and whispered into the stillness. Time to send this where silence can't reach. The letter arrived in a thick white envelope with gold-embossed lettering. Certified. Delivered by hand. The kind that makes your stomach twist before you even open it. Elowin was in the kitchen, pouring tea, when I sliced it open with the back of a butter knife. It was from a law firm in downtown Sacramento. Representing Ms. Xanthi Barlow, the header read in stiff type. Inside, 3 pages of accusations: slander, defamation, intentional harm to reputation, and familial harassment. I read every word out loud. Elowin leaned against the counter, arms crossed, listening without interrupting. They're scared, she said, when I was done. I folded the letter once, then again. Funny how the ones who steal most scream first when you speak. We didn't laugh. There wasn't anything funny about it, but there was something deeply satisfying in seeing them scramble. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and resumed organizing the case. The drive labeled Exhibit A now had 37 files, video clips, scanned contracts, dated messages, and legal definitions I'd copied and pasted from state law databases. I wasn't trying to build a spectacle. I was building structure. Quiet, steady structure. While shifting documents into a new folder, I stumbled on something I hadn't listened to in years. A voicemail, dated 5 years back. From Betrayal. Happy birthday, sweetheart, her voice said, soft and honeyed. I know we've had some tension this year, but you're my responsibility. You always have been. Don't ever doubt that. I played it again, slower, just to hear her say the word responsibility. That message used to comfort me. Used to be the voice I played on hard days to remind myself I still mattered somewhere in her heart. Now it was evidence, not because it proved a lie, but because it proved she knew she held weight in my life, knew the leverage she'd always had, and used it anyway. I added it to the folder and labeled it, Statement, Prior Emotional Position. Old warmth wasn't enough to sway me anymore. Later that evening, Elowin called me into the living room. She had a piece of paper in her hand. You should have this, she said. It was the original copy of the life insurance policy from 10 years ago, the one that had my name on it, the one I'd signed in the bank lobby beside Basia, her signature neat and practiced, mine smaller, hopeful. I scanned it the day you gave it to me, Elowin said. Call it intuition. I stared at the paper, my name printed so clearly, so definitively. Not just handwritten, typed, legal. I kept it because I knew if this family ever tried to pretend you didn't exist, they'd need someone who remembered otherwise. Some people keep your name safe when others erase it, I said, not meaning to say it out loud. She nodded, folding the copy carefully back into its envelope. Let me know when you send it. I'll be ready. The next morning, I opened my laptop and uploaded every piece of evidence. Audio, screenshots, voicemails. The video of Xanthi calling me dead weight. The scanned version of the original policy. The community post from Bacia calling me mentally unwell. The final file was a written timeline, carefully compiled. Dates, actions, names, implications. Then, I opened a new email, addressed to the State Board of Insurance. Subject, formal complaint. Unauthorized beneficiary change. Policy misconduct. I CC'd the California Elder Justice Coalition, a nonprofit Nora had suggested. Attached every file. Checked it twice. My hand hovered over the trackpad for a second. Then I clicked send. The moment I chose to stop surviving them, I started living beyond them. I closed the laptop. That afternoon, Elowen texted me a screenshot. Xanthi's spa account had lost over 800 followers in 2 days. One of her sponsors had quietly removed her from their brand partners page. Beisia's most recent Facebook post, a photo of her and Xanthi at the gala, had a dozen comments now, none of them kind. How could you do this to your own child? You should be ashamed. I hope she sues the hell out of you. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't even react. Instead, I grabbed a jacket, slipped my phone into my pocket, and went for a walk. The air was crisp. Sunlight filtered through the trees, leaving warm patches on the sidewalk. It was the first time in weeks I noticed the smell of fresh-cut grass. No one stared, no one whispered, no one knew. And for the first time, I liked it that way. They thought their silence protected them. But mine? It documented everything. The day after I submitted the complaint, I checked my inbox like someone bracing for a wave that might never come. The confirmation from the State Board of Insurance was there. Formal, thanking me for my submission, telling me someone would be in touch. That was it. No fireworks, no immediate justice, just a line in the sand. But what stood out more than that confirmation was everything that didn't come. No call from Beisia, no message from Xanthi, no half-hearted apology disguised as clarification, not even a petty response. Their silence used to hurt. Now it sounded like a door slamming behind them. And for once, I wasn't the one on the wrong side. Their social media had gone quieter too. Beisia had turned off comments. Xanthi's page, once dripping with daily affirmations and boss energy, had gone 2 days without a post. That alone felt like a public confession. They didn't go quiet because they were sorry. They went quiet because they lost control. I sat with that thought for a while. Let it simmer until it didn't burn anymore. It just settled. 2 evenings later, Elowen knocked on my door holding her phone. She left a voicemail, she said. We sat on the couch, she pressed play. Beisia's voice was vague, clipped, like she wasn't sure who she was talking to anymore. Tell her. I never meant for it to go that far. That was it. No apology. No ownership. Just a vague shrug masquerading as remorse. Elowen looked at me. Do you want to respond? I didn't hesitate. No. Do you want closure? I exhaled slowly. I already got it. I just didn't get an apology with it. I didn't need anything else from her. I wasn't waiting for reconciliation anymore. I wasn't orbiting their approval. The next day, I ran errands, bought groceries, picked up laundry detergent, paid a bill in person just for the satisfaction of checking it off in my notebook. I cooked dinner, a simple pasta with lemon and roasted garlic. The scent filled my apartment and reminded me that I was still here, still whole. At the checkout line, a neighbor smiled at me. Your hydrangeas are blooming beautifully, she said. Thank you, I replied, meaning it. Healing isn't about justice. It's about not carrying what tried to break you. After dinner, I sat down with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I started writing a letter, not to send, but to purge. Dear Beisia, I began. I wrote about everything. The years of being overlooked, the policy, the way she made silence into a weapon. I wrote about how it felt to be excluded, to be forgotten on purpose. I didn't use flowery words. I didn't exaggerate. I ended the letter like this. Not your daughter by your rules, still your daughter by truth. Then I folded it neatly, walked to the kitchen, lit a candle, and burned the letter, 1 page at a time. The paper curled, blackened, vanished. My hands didn't shake. Later that week, Elowen and I met Lilac at the park. We brought coffee and sat under the same tree we'd gathered around after my post went viral. This time, no one was crying. We laughed, talked about Elowen's tomato plant that wouldn't stop growing sideways. Lilac joked about her new boss who typed in all caps. We didn't talk about Beisia or Xanthi or anything that still sat heavy. Sometimes healing is quiet. I'm starting a blog, I said. They both looked at me. Not a sob story, a guide, about financial manipulation, about how families bury people without ever holding funerals. I want to document what it means to be written out, and how to write yourself back in. Elowen smiled. What will you call it? Erased but not silent, I said. I went home and opened my laptop, created the domain, wrote the first draft of the About page. My name is Ione Larkin. For years, I was told who I was and who I wasn't. I was excluded, silenced, legally erased. But I never stopped existing. This space is for anyone who's been rewritten. If you've ever felt erased, I've saved you a page. The envelope was thick, official, and bore the seal of the State Board of Insurance across the flap. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it, hands steady. I had imagined this moment so many times that by the time it arrived, I no longer feared what it might say. Inside was a formal acknowledgement. My complaint had triggered a full investigation. The second page was a copy of Basia's submitted forms. My name struck through in red, replaced by Xanthi's, and accompanied by phrases like diminished capacity, no longer reliable, emotionally unstable. Falsehoods, each one, fabricated to justify a theft made with a pen. I smiled. Small, quiet, not from joy, but from confirmation. It was all there now, out in the open, on record. They thought no one was watching. I made sure someone finally did. 2 days later, Elowen got the tip first. There's a hearing scheduled, she said, walking into my apartment holding her phone. It's public. I didn't ask who tipped her. I just nodded. I already knew I'd be attending. The room wasn't grand, no polished courtroom or echoing chambers, just a long table, 4 officials seated behind it, clipboards, laptops, glasses of water. I sat beside Elowen, our chairs close, our backs straight. They called Basia's name. She entered wearing navy, not black, not beige, something in between. Xanthi followed behind her, face pale under makeup, shoulders drawn. The officials began. They read through the timeline I'd submitted, played portions of the audio, displayed side-by-side copies of the policy, read aloud the part where Basia had declared me legally incapable without ever producing a single doctor's note. Xanthi never looked up. One of the board members asked Basia directly, "Do you understand that this constitutes a misrepresentation of your daughter's medical status under penalty of law?" Basia blinked slowly, as if waking up in someone else's story. I was trying to protect the family's assets. A low murmur rippled through the room. By the end of the hearing, she had agreed to a settlement that would reverse the beneficiary change and be subject to financial restitution. A formal reprimand would be issued. The case would be referred to a civil panel if I chose to press charges. But the highlight came after. The local paper published a headline the next morning. Retired educator accused of financial misconduct against daughter. The article quoted portions of the hearing, anonymized my name but not hers. Xanthi's spa page plummeted overnight. I didn't check, but Elowen showed me. Comments stacked beneath her last photo, most of them angry, some confused, many tagging others with, "Is this for real?" and "She's trash." I didn't feel vindictive. I felt finished. Later that week, I received a letter from Basia. Handwritten. It opened with, "I never thought things would turn out like this." I stopped reading after the first line. I burned it without ceremony. One corner, then the rest, fed into the glass candle bowl on my kitchen table. I watched the flame consume it page by page. It didn't feel symbolic. It felt necessary. "She wants a reaction," Elowen said when I told her. "But I only respond to truth now." We drank coffee that morning in her garden, talked about fall tomatoes and how the mailman always wore mismatched socks. It was the first time I noticed how quiet the world felt when no one was trying to control it. A week later, I launched my blog, Erased but Not Silent. The homepage featured my story, the evidence, redacted for privacy, and a section titled Resources for the Silenced. Within 24 hours, it had over 300 views, then a donation, then 5 more, then emails. One woman wrote, "I haven't spoken to my father in 12 years. But reading your blog, I realized I'm not alone. Another said, "My brother stole my name off the deed to our grandparents' house. Thank you for giving people like me a space." This wasn't revenge. This was rebuilding. They taught me how to disappear. I taught myself how to return. One Thursday afternoon, I walked through the Civic Center plaza wearing jeans and a blue sweater. A woman from the local library waved. A high school guidance counselor I hadn't seen in years stopped to say, "I read your story. I'm sorry, and I'm proud of you." I was headed to speak on a panel about family financial abuse and legal protections. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. When they introduced me, the moderator read my name slowly, with weight. Ione Larkin, advocate, survivor, writer. I stepped up to the mic. They never apologized. They never acknowledged me. And that's okay, because I didn't win with revenge. I won with truth. They lost a daughter. I gained a voice. And I plan to use it louder than ever.